Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Southerner's Northern Garden. So today we're going to be doing a little projects in the yard. I don't have much cutting back left to do. I still need to do my lavender and hydrangeas. Most of the perennial cleanup is complete, but there's a lot of other little projects here and there that I've got to get done before our last freeze so that I can move on with stuff, including removing the landscaping fabric in the raised bed. But today I trimmed my fruit trees 2 days ago, an evening 2 days ago, and I didn't show that on my channel because I am not a fruit tree trimming expert and I don't know what I'm doing. And I actually have had these trees in the ground for 3 years. They were pretty large when I got them to begin with, and I've gotten one pair off of these trees. The peach tree always gets peach tree leaf curl, and I think it has canker, and so I might end up having to remove my peach tree completely. The apple, we just have really late frost here. I've got a couple cherries off the tree, and so this is the year that if we continue to have late frost and I don't get any fruit this year, any substantial amount of fruit, I'm considering cutting down my fruit trees completely because I can use that space to grow cut flowers or something else, something more productive. And so I've got some limbs back here from my fruit trees that I trimmed off. This is a little Sunjo electric trimmer. So I bought this last year and I did a lot of review searching and looking online, and there's two versions or more versions of this trimmer right here. Where's that? Right there. The red one, based on what I reviewed, doesn't tend to actually chip the branches. It kind of cuts them. So I bought the gray one, even though they're supposed to do the same thing. People were saying the gray one was much better. I think the gray one doesn't have as much power, but it's plenty enough to go through, I think, 1.5 to 2 inch stems. I don't know exactly. I'll put the model number that I bought down below, and you can look it up if you're interested. I love power tools because, you know, I'm a gardener, and although these tools aren't necessary, they do make tasks a lot easier in some cases and make it easier on my hand and to dispose. Because what I can essentially do, and what I'm going to show you, is run these branches through here because I typically are trimming smaller branches. I can run them through here, and then I can add them back to my garden if they're not diseased, which is what I will probably be doing. I'll just get them in a bucket and add them to the bottom of a container or something this year, maybe the raised bed that I'm building to put my raspberries in. But this is a really easy process. It might be a little loud, but I want to show you the size that it chips off. I don't think this chipper was too expensive, maybe around $150. I don't remember. I bought it probably close to a year ago now, but I'm going to set this down and just show you what it looks like. It is a little loud, even though it is electric, so make sure you're wearing your PPE, including your goggles and your earbuds. And so we're going to get started. So you can see there kind of what you're going to get with this shredder. It actually makes pretty fine mulch here, which is really nice. This smells really great because it's from fruit trees, and it was just cut a couple days ago, so it's still very green. This thing, although it's electric and does a pretty good job, it doesn't do the best job on like hard branches that have been sitting around for a while. That's why I wanted to go ahead and get these trimmed up as quick as I could. But to be an electric tool, it is pretty good at its job. You have to pretty much put straight limbs in there, so it's not going to take anything that has a thick limb. You see I had to cut some of them off. So pretty straight, 1.5 inch branches it will get through with no problem. If it's dried out a little bit, it will have a little bit more issues. Some woods it may not work on as good as others. It went through these pretty easily, and it's created a really nice fine mulch. So I just wanted to show you this process. I love a lot of electric tools simply because I don't have to smell like gas when I'm done with them, and gas powered chippers are extremely expensive and really large to store. So this one's really lightweight. I actually lifted it and it was stored in the top of my shed over winter, and so it can go out of the way really easily. It takes up a really minor footprint here, and so it's just super lightweight to move around, and I really love it. So I'm going to run through these branches. I've got some more back there, and then we're going to tackle another project today that I want to get done. So I'm finished with this for today. Typically it seems like you shred a lot of stuff and you don't end up with much, but that's a good sign that the shredder's doing a good job. So we have right here, it doesn't do the best job on like tiny sticks. Sometimes they will get through, so if you're interested, just know that. But if you're using this as like a mulch in an area, or at the bottom of containers or a raised bed, it's still really good stuff. So you can see how fine this is right here. So for anyone wondering about my fruit trees, I do spray them in winter typically with a fungicide, a copper fungicide. I didn't get to that this year, and that's mainly because whether I spray them or not, I've not had great success, particularly on the peach. The past 2 years I've sprayed it and I still get peach leaf curl. Peach leaf curl is pretty standard, and it will not kill the tree. Neither will peach leaf canker initially, from my understanding, and you can prune around it carefully, but mine is actually showing up on the trunk. And so while I have a dwarf peach tree, I don't want to let that persist and have a really large tree that's even more difficult to remove. So I will probably definitely be removing the peach tree this year. I didn't prune much off of it, just a little bit, because we do have that issue with late frost. And so I want as many buds as possible, and if I start developing lots of fruit, I will come through and prune off more branches so the fruit that is bearing can get some additional nutrients and get a little bigger. Like I said, I'm no fruit tree expert. My granddad, Walter, was like an incredible fruit tree grower, and he would graft multiple fruits onto the same trunk and tree and have multiple fruits growing on the same tree. I have not got that far yet. I'm mostly an ornamental gardener and a vegetable gardener. Fruit trees are something I feel like that's very specific. You're either good with them or you're not. You can learn, and I just haven't taken the time to learn. But also the weather we have up here, you can of course cover your trees for frost. Some of these trees I have are pretty big already, and as you know, I don't like to deal with the fussy plants, so I don't want something that I'm gonna have to baby to bring fruit. And if it's not working, there's something more lovely that I can put there that will do better and make me happier. So what I want to do today, although I don't typically prune it this early, it's typically the last week of March, so maybe a week early, I'm going to go ahead and prune back my lavender. I typically wait until the new growth starts growing at the bottom, but our weather is looking pretty good, and so although we still have a month and a half, or a good month until our last frost at least, I'm going to go ahead and go prune that down. That way I can get that cleaned up and out of the way to prepare for other projects. So let's get going. There's nothing to it. I prune mine down pretty hard. You don't want to cut it off at the ground, obviously, but a couple inches up. Otherwise, last year's growth gets really woody, and I like that really soft, delicate, run my hands through lavender feel. So let's go do that. I use Hedge trimmers, and that's what we're going to do today. It'll smell really good. It's also kind of messy. So this lavender is Hidcote, Hidcote. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this will be, I believe, its 4th year as a hedge, and I've not lost any lavender. So lavender likes nice draining soil. It is a Mediterranean herb, and so I have heavy clay soil. But when I planted this lavender, I got it from Lowe's perennial sale that they have every year, and they were like $4 a piece. Nice 3/4 gallon, I think, size perennials at that point. I put some sand at the bottom of the hole. That way they would drain pretty well, because this area does tend to hold water pretty bad. One of the benefits of pruning lavender in the fall is that it doesn't catch all this junk That's one thing I don't like about leaving mine stand, but I'm afraid if I prune it in the fall that the snow load sometimes we get can be pretty bad, and the cold might get down and damage the crown of the plant more. So I leave mine standing till spring, and that's really the only reason I do it. But it does catch a lot of junk, which I don't like. So I'm gonna come through with the hedge trimmers and just trim this back just a few inches above the ground. You can see where I cut it last year right here. That's kind of the same way you want to trim it, just right here. And you can actually see there's just now fresh new growth coming out. The buds are starting to bud, so this is a perfect time to prune it actually. I usually let a little more in there, but doing it this early would probably even be better. So just so you know, lavender is kind of a messy process. So what I go through is the first time is cut it a little higher, pull out all of this, and then go back and clean it up a little nicer at the end. And this, my friends, is why I try to be a little more careful with my pruners, because I just trimmed my drip irrigation. So we had a little cut right here. Before I forget about that, I will come out here after I'm done pruning this and mend it, so that isn't just leaking water into the bed. I would obviously know it when they activate the irrigation system, but I'd rather fix it now while it's on my mind. All right, we're done here. I came through and used a leaf blower to blow up some of the debris there. We have some baby lavenders. I mentioned it's hard to grow lavender for me from seed, but we have this Hidcote readily reseeds in the garden, and so I try and pull that up. I have saved plants before, but I just don't have anywhere to put it, so I'm removing it. And there will be more plants coming up, like in between here and the cracks. It's kind of crazy how prolific it germinates when you're not trying to get it to grow. But this is kind of what you're looking for. Just little mounds here, and then you won't even be able to see this rough looking growth in another month. So one of the big reasons why I selected this variety is it does stay a little smaller. It doesn't get as large as some of your Munsteads, and I had very limited space here, and I didn't want something getting super large. And so Hidcote is a great variety for those reasons, but also it tends to bloom for me all year. So I don't cut it down in the summer. A lot of people will cut down and trim their lavender like other perennials. The calyxes, I guess is what you call them, that hold the flower buds to the lavender itself, are a little darker, and so even when it's in periods of not blooming, it still looks great. But I find that I always have blooms, even if some of the older blooms have faded out. It's always continuously producing more buds for me. So I have had really good luck with this variety in my garden, even with the clay soil. It was initially on drip irrigation. It's still on drip irrigation. It probably doesn't need it at this point given how old it is, but I'm not coming through and ripping drip irrigation up out of my beds and making a mess for places like this that are pretty well established. This area is also an area I want to work on this year along with the side garden. I need to add some more of those coneflowers that I've been purchasing in here just to get a little more color. It's kind of a weird situation because it gets east morning sun and then sun through lunch, but after that time it's in the shade all day. So it's kind of a weird lighting scenario, and I haven't found a lot of things in here that stay happy all summer. So that's another problem we're gonna have to work on this year. So let's go ahead and fix this drip irrigation that I damaged before I forget about it. So the problem right here is I have an actual emitter on the strip tube right next to where I cut it. So I'm gonna have to cut out this entire emitter, which means I may have to go get a little piece of tubing to fill in the spot. Normally I would just cut it and put a coupler on it, but because I can't cut this closely to an emitter without cutting through the emitter and not being able to insert a barb, I'm going to have to replace a short piece of tubing. So let me go grab my supplies and I'll be right back. So I have a different variety of drip irrigation, but it doesn't really matter. You can see the difference in the drippers here. So this one is by 𝗩𝗜𝗗𝗘𝗢, which is what I used to start with, but you can't find that locally around me. And so this is Rainbird, which I get locally from Menards. And so what we want to do is just cut off a length of this, and then we'll just replace the dripper in about the same spot. That way we're not losing any functionality. So this is the piece that got cut and has a hole in it here. And I'm just going to replace it with this piece. Now, drip irrigation does require a little strength sometimes. These pieces that are not been in the sun can get really difficult to insert, especially after they've been cold. And so just get on there the best you can. It is a Barb connector, so it's not going anywhere. And then you may just have to trim off a little excess here. You could heat it up with a heat gun potentially. You obviously don't want to melt the drip tubing. I have never had that issue. If you lay it out in the sun for a little bit, typically it will work pretty well for you, but it can be a little finicky, and there's no good way to insert these barbs tool that I've seen. There is a good one for the 1/4" drip, but you just have to kind of fiddle with these until it gets going. And that is good enough. It's on there enough that it's not going anywhere. And then I will grab a staple, and then we'll cover this up with mulch, and you'll never know this happened. All right, everyone, so I have trimmed up and blown out these flower beds. It's not perfect. I will come in with some mulch and mulch over after a few weeks after I finish cleaning up the rest of these perennials. The boxwoods behind me, I've always trimmed into little spheres. Well, they're getting pretty big, and I want your thoughts on whether I should just go ahead and prune those into a straight hedge. So you can actually see how close some of them are to touching right here. This one's got a bigger gap, and this one does too, but the others are pretty close. And so I'm wondering if I should just shear them off at a box and then make this nice little hedge that will eventually run into this green mountain and just become like a little point up, or if I should continue trimming them in little spheres. This one's always had this little issue with not filling out back here. These are mostly in the shade for most of the day, but I kind of like the spheres, and these might actually be too far apart to start trimming into a hedge, especially these. So I probably should prune them back into a ball this year, but I wanted your thoughts and see how this might look to you if it was just trimmed off square at the top and square on the sides. Thank you guys for joining me on this beautiful and productive day. I hope you learned something. I certainly enjoyed you joining me. And remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Take care. Bye.